Today I am going to talk about Octavia Butler's novel Fledgling, which is a vampire novel that is taking place in the present day and it has a very interesting storyline. Now, this particular vampire story is a little different from any other vampire story that I've read, and Octavia Butler is a master of science fiction and horror. Her novel Kindred was something that really hit me really hard, and that was regarding time travel, and I think I'm actually going to do another video about that one because that's a whole nother discussion. But Kindred was another one of her works that really affected me and has inspired me. So back to Fledgling. Fledgling is basically a vampire novel, but it has a lot of commentary that could be applied to social issues today. But even on its own, just the premise is different. It's about a young girl who wakes up in the wilderness and has no idea who she is or why she's there, and she ends up attacking a creature and feeding on it, and then slowly she begins to regain her strength and bits and pieces of her memory. Well, it turns out that this girl is actually a vampire. She's 53 years old, and she is not finding anyone like her around. She meets some humans and forms a symbiotic relationship with them where she uses their blood for survival and the human uses her saliva as a sort of, the saliva of these vampires helps boost the immunity of humans, and it also is addictive for humans. So there are some interesting storylines going on in this novel as well, because the main character, her name is Shori, and she is a black girl and all the other vampires are white, and it turns out that she is an experiment, a genetically modified experiment done by her vampire clan to find a way to make vampires resistant to sunlight. And I find this whole experimentation very interesting, because we have a lot of people who say black people shouldn't be vampires, or black people don't make good vampires, and that vampire mythology is overwhelmingly white. So I think it's a very interesting way to address that in this novel by using that as a driving point to include darker skin tones. Maybe somehow a darker skin tone, a genetically modified vampire with a darker skin tone might somehow be resistant to sunlight, which is vampires' biggest weakness. So I find that incredibly interesting and a fun read, and of course she faces a lot of hatred for what she is. And I think that, without giving away too much more of the story, because I really think you should read it for yourself, it's incredibly good. I think that Octavia Butler, again, does a brilliant job of using fantasy or horror, science fiction, to weave in social issues and to make commentary on our society without putting it like in your face or throwing it over your head. Like, she really does a great job of being direct about it, being, like it's an allegory, but it's also very direct. It's also very matter of fact, and I really appreciate that about her writing. I feel that, some of the films that I've watched for the horror series have been a bit over the top with religious symbolism and religious allegory, and I find that a turn-off, but that's something that I did not find a turn-off with this novel. I found that it to be more compelling and more interesting, and I think it's a good read. It's a quick read as well. It's not a very long book. I have it in ebook format, so I can't quite show the physical copy today, but you can get it on Amazon or wherever you buy your ebooks. And I highly recommend it, especially for Black History Month. And I highly recommend pretty much any Octavia Butler novel. But Fledgling is definitely a great one if you are a fan of the vampire mythology, if you are a fan of speculative fiction, and if you are looking for an interesting read with a bit of mystery. I would give it a go. Have you read this book? Go ahead and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you have any more recommendations for either horror or vampire themed novels by Black authors, let me know in the comments. I'm going to be starting to talk about science fiction as well in the future. So I would also love to hear your recommendations for those. Thank you again for coming to the channel and watching, and happy Black History Month.